The person you love was drunk with their friends last night. Then their friend said something about you that you need to know right now. There is something about last night that keeps pulling at your heart, even though you were not there to see what happened. Maybe you woke up with a strange feeling. Maybe their name crossed your mind before you even reached for your phone. Maybe you suddenly wondered what they were doing, who they were with, and whether they were thinking about you. You may not have an explanation for that feeling, but this message is asking you to pause for a moment and listen to what your heart has been trying to tell you. Imagine a late night when everything around them became quieter. Their friends were nearby. Conversations became more honest than they usually are. The walls people normally build around their feelings became weaker, and somehow, in the middle of all that noise, your name entered the conversation. At first, they may have tried to brush it aside, maybe they laughed, maybe they changed the subject, maybe they acted as though hearing your name meant nothing. But their friends noticed something. They noticed the change in their expression. They noticed the silence that followed. They noticed that when your name was mentioned, something inside them became different, and that is where the story begins, because sometimes the truth about someone's feelings is not revealed when everything is perfectly controlled. Sometimes people hide behind ordinary conversations, busy schedules, jokes, pride, distance, and silence. They convince themselves that they have moved on. They tell themselves they are fine. They tell their friends that they do not care as much as they once did. But then someone mentions the one person they have been trying not to think about, you, and suddenly, the room feels different. This is not a claim that you can know exactly what happened last night. It is a spiritual style reflection about something many people experience when feelings remain unresolved. Sometimes a person's friends can see emotional truth before the person is ready to admit it themselves, and perhaps that is why this message feels so personal. Because there is a difference between forgetting someone and pretending you have forgotten them. There is a difference between moving forward and simply keeping yourself busy. There is a difference between being over someone and learning how to live with missing them. Your person may have been trying to convince themselves that everything is under control. They may have acted normal around others. They may have smiled, joked, talked about ordinary things, and pretended that your absence did not affect them. But emotions do not always disappear simply because someone refuses to talk about them. Sometimes they wait, sometimes they hide, sometimes they return unexpectedly when a familiar song plays. When a memory appears, when someone asks a simple question, or when a friend says the one sentence that breaks through the wall, maybe one of their friends looked at them and said something like, "You still care about that person, don't you?" And suddenly there was nothing easy to say, because the question was too close to the truth. Maybe they laughed nervously, maybe they looked away, maybe they said, "It's complicated." But everyone in the room understood that complicated was not the whole story. There was something underneath it, something they had not fully explained, something they had not fully released, something connected to you, and perhaps their friends already knew. Friends often notice things people think they have successfully hidden. They notice who someone checks their phone for. They notice which name makes them suddenly quiet. They notice who gets mentioned repeatedly even when the conversation is supposedly about something else. They notice when a person says, "I don't care," with an expression that seems to say the exact opposite, and maybe that is what happened in this fictional scene. One friend remembered you. Another friend asked what happened between you. Someone wondered whether you two would ever speak again, and suddenly your person had to sit with a question they had been avoiding. What if I still love them? That question can be frightening. Because admitting that you still care means admitting that the past did not disappear as easily as you wanted it to. It means acknowledging that there may still be something unfinished. It means looking honestly at the decisions you made, the words you said, the words you never said, and the moments when fear controlled you. Maybe your person regrets something. Maybe they regret waiting too long. Maybe they regret allowing pride to become more powerful than affection. Maybe they regret pretending not to care. Maybe they regret not giving you the reassurance you deserved. Maybe they regret walking away from a conversation that should have continued. Or maybe they simply regret not being brave enough to tell you what was actually happening inside their heart. And that is the part their friends may have noticed, not necessarily some dramatic confession, not necessarily a perfect declaration, but a reaction, a hesitation, a sudden silence, a change in the way they spoke about you, sometimes that tells more than 100 carefully chosen words. You may be wondering why this message found you. Maybe you have been asking yourself whether you mattered. Maybe you have questioned whether the connection was real. Maybe you have replayed old conversations and wondered whether you misunderstood everything. Maybe you have looked at the distance between you and thought, if they cared, why didn't they come closer? That question hurts because it seems logical. But human beings are not always logical when emotions become complicated. Someone can care and still be afraid. Someone can miss you and still remain silent. Someone can want to reach out and still convince themselves that they should wait. Someone can think about you constantly and still act as though they have moved on. That does not automatically mean the relationship is destined to return. It simply means emotions can be complicated, and silence does not always tell the entire story. Your heart deserves that honesty. You do not need to build your future around an assumption. You do not need to wait endlessly for someone who has not chosen to communicate. You do not need to interpret every coincidence as proof. But you can allow yourself to acknowledge one simple possibility. Maybe you mattered more than they ever knew how to express. Maybe the connection left a deeper impression than either of you expected. Maybe the distance forced both of you to discover feelings that were easier to ignore when you were close. And maybe the conversation with their friends became a mirror showing them something they had been avoiding. Perhaps one friend said, "You always become different when someone talks about them." Another might have said, "You should just tell them how you feel." And your person may have immediately become defensive. It's not that simple. Those 4 words can contain an entire history. It's not that simple. Because there may be timing, there may be fear, there may be misunderstandings, there may be circumstances neither person knows how to change, there may be pride, there may be uncertainty, there may be a fear of rejection, and underneath all of those things may be a very simple truth: they still care. Maybe they have wondered whether you still care too. Maybe they have asked themselves whether you have forgotten them. Maybe they have secretly wondered whether someone else has entered your life. Maybe they have imagined what would happen if they suddenly received a message from you. Would you answer? Would you be angry? Would you be happy? Would you act like you did not care? Would you forgive them? Would you ask why they disappeared? These questions can keep a person awake long after everyone else has gone home, and perhaps last night, surrounded by friends, your person finally had nowhere to hide from those questions. The night became quieter, the conversations became more personal, and someone brought you up again. This time, perhaps they did not laugh. This time, perhaps they admitted something small: I miss them. 3 simple words, yet sometimes 3 words can reveal what months of silence could not. I miss them. Maybe they did not say it exactly that way. Maybe they said, I wonder how they're doing. Maybe they said, I haven't talked to them in a while. Maybe they said, things were different with them. Maybe they simply became quiet, but their friends understood, because when someone truly means nothing anymore, their name usually does not carry that kind of weight. Still, remember this: a feeling is not the same thing as a promise. Someone missing you does not automatically mean they are ready for a healthy relationship. Someone regretting something does not automatically mean they know how to repair it. Someone thinking about you does not mean you should put your life on pause. That distinction matters. You deserve more than mysterious signs. You deserve communication. You deserve respect. You deserve consistency. You deserve someone who can speak honestly while fully awake, fully responsible, and fully aware of what they are saying. If this spiritual message means anything, let it remind you not to chase shadows. Do not chase rumors. Do not chase imagined conversations. Do not spend every night wondering what someone might be saying somewhere you cannot see. Instead, let the possibility remind you of your own worth. You can be loved without begging for proof. You can be remembered without monitoring someone's every move. You can matter to someone without needing to abandon your own peace. And if this person truly wants another chance, they can demonstrate that through clear and respectful actions. That is the kind of love worth recognizing. Maybe that is why the conversation among their friends became important, because perhaps their friends did not only talk about you, perhaps they talked about the way your person has changed since you entered their life. Maybe someone said, you were happier when you were with them. Maybe someone reminded them of a memory. Maybe someone said, you always talk about them when you're upset. Maybe someone asked, why don't you just reach out? And perhaps your person had no answer, because the answer was buried under fear. There are people who lose something meaningful and spend a long time trying to prove to themselves that losing it was necessary. They create explanations. They create distractions. They tell themselves they are better off. They surround themselves with noise. They keep moving, but eventually the noise becomes quiet, and when it does, the heart speaks. Maybe last night was one of those moments. Maybe the quiet came. Maybe the memories returned. Maybe they remembered your voice. Maybe they remembered your smile. Maybe they remembered a conversation you had. Maybe they remembered the way you understood. Something about them that other people never noticed, and suddenly they realized something uncomfortable. They were not only missing the relationship, they were missing you, your presence, your way of seeing them. Your patience, your energy, the feeling of being understood, the little things they once considered ordinary, that realization can arrive late, sometimes far too late, but late realization is still realization, and if they have truly changed, that realization can become the beginning of something healthier, not because destiny forces two people together, but because honest reflection can change how someone behaves. Perhaps their friends challenged them, perhaps someone said, "If you care, stop pretending you don't." That sentence may have stayed in their mind, because pretending can be exhausting, pretending not to care, pretending not to miss someone, pretending that everything is fine. Pretending that the past has no emotional weight, at some point, pretending becomes heavier than honesty, and maybe that is what your person is beginning to understand. You may have thought they forgot, they may have thought you forgot. Two people can miss each other at the same time while both remain silent because each assumes the other has moved on. That is one of the saddest misunderstandings in human relationships. And it is why communication matters so much, if there is ever another conversation between you. Let it be real, no games, no tests, no manipulation, no trying to make the other person jealous, no pretending to be someone you are not, just truth. What happened? How did you feel? What do you want now? Can we rebuild trust? Those questions are more powerful than any mysterious sign, and perhaps this is the deeper message hidden inside the dramatic story of last night. The important thing is not whether someone mentioned your name. The important thing is whether the person who loves you is willing to honor what they feel through responsible action. Anyone can miss someone. Anyone can feel nostalgic. Anyone can become emotional during a late-night conversation, but mature love asks for more. It asks for courage. It asks for accountability. It asks for patience. It asks for consistency. It asks two people to stop hiding behind fear. So if you are reading this and thinking about your person, breathe. You do not have to figure everything out tonight. You do not have to decide what their friends meant. You do not have to predict what happens next. You do not have to force anything. Let what is real reveal itself naturally. If they want to talk, they can talk. If they want to apologize, they can apologize. If they want to rebuild, they can show you. And if they remain silent, you are still allowed to move forward. Your life does not become less meaningful because someone else has not yet recognized what they lost. Your future does not depend on one person's decision. Your heart is not waiting for permission to heal. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to smile again. You are allowed to make new memories. You are allowed to become stronger. And if someone from your past eventually returns, you can decide from a place of wisdom rather than loneliness. That is important, because sometimes people return not because they have changed, but because they miss the comfort you provided. Those are not the same thing. You should not have to become someone's emotional safety net while they continue giving you uncertainty. If they return, look at their actions, Listen to their words. Notice whether they take responsibility. Notice whether they respect your boundaries. Notice whether they are consistent. Notice whether they are willing to build something rather than simply reopen an old wound. That is how you protect your heart without closing it. And perhaps your person is learning the same lesson. Maybe their friend said something that made them think. Maybe they realized they had been treating the connection like something they could return to whenever they wanted. Maybe they realized you were not guaranteed to remain available. Maybe the possibility of truly losing you finally became real. That can be a powerful realization, because sometimes people only recognize the value of a door after it stops being open. But your worth was always there. You did not become valuable because they finally noticed. You were valuable before they understood. You were valuable while they were confused. You were valuable while they were distant. You were valuable even during the moments when they failed to show it. Never let another person's uncertainty become the measurement of your worth. If they love you, let them learn to love you well. If they miss you, let them learn to communicate. If they regret something, let them learn to repair it. If they want another chance, let them earn trust. That is not cruelty, that is self-respect. Maybe this is the part your person does not understand yet. Love is not simply a feeling. Love is behavior. Love is showing up. Love is listening. Love is being honest. Love is respecting another person's boundaries. Love is accepting responsibility. Love is making room for another person's truth. Love is not merely saying, "I miss you." It is asking, "What can I do differently this time?" Perhaps their friends were trying to make them see that. Perhaps they reminded them of the way you were there during difficult moments. Perhaps they asked whether your person had ever properly thanked you. Maybe your person became quiet because they knew the answer. Maybe there are words they wish they had said. "I'm sorry. I should have told you. I was scared. I did care. I did not know how to handle it. I thought I had more time." Those sentences can be difficult because they require vulnerability. But vulnerability is often where real healing begins. You may never hear every word they wish they could say, and you do not need to. Your peace cannot depend on receiving a perfect confession. Sometimes closure comes from understanding yourself. You loved, you tried, you learned, you grew, and now you can choose what happens next. Maybe your path brings this person back. Maybe it does not. Either way, your life continues to unfold. There are still people you have not met, places you have not seen, dreams you have not reached, versions of yourself you have not discovered. Do not make one unfinished relationship the entire story of your life. Let it be a chapter. Maybe an important chapter, maybe a beautiful chapter, maybe a painful chapter, but still only a chapter. And if the story continues, let it continue differently. Let it continue with honesty. Let it continue with maturity. Let it continue with mutual effort. Let it continue without the confusion that once caused so much pain. Maybe that is the real transformation happening beneath this message. Not a magical event, not a guaranteed reunion, but a change in perspective. Your person may be realizing that avoiding their feelings did not make those feelings disappear. and you may be realizing that waiting for someone else to validate your importance is not necessary. Both lessons can exist at the same time. Perhaps that is why the thought of last night feels so powerful. It represents a moment when something hidden was brought into the open, a name, a memory, a question, a feeling, a realization, and once something has been recognized, it becomes harder to pretend it does not exist. Maybe your person went home thinking about you. Maybe they stared at their phone. Maybe they considered sending a message. Maybe they typed something and deleted it. Maybe they wondered whether you would answer. Again, this is a symbolic possibility, not something anyone can verify from a spiritual message, but imagine the emotional weight of that moment. The screen is quiet, the room is quiet. The night is ending, and the one person they thought they had successfully forgotten is suddenly the person occupying their thoughts. They may wonder, do they still think about me? Would they forgive me? Did I hurt them more than I realized? Have they moved on? Did I lose my chance? Those questions can change a person, but only if they allow the questions to teach them something. Regret alone is not transformation. Awareness must become action. That is the difference. Maybe tomorrow they will wake up and the emotion will feel less intense. Maybe life will become busy again. Maybe they will return to their routine. But if the feeling is genuine, it may continue appearing quietly. Not as an obsession, not as a command, but as a reminder that something meaningful happened, a reminder that someone mattered, a reminder that some conversations deserve to be completed, and perhaps one day, when both